Hello, I'm Shaylee from Patterns by Shaylee, and we are 1 week away from starting the Quilt Along for a Cause 2020. We are sending almost 30 quilts to children in need this year, which is just amazing, and I'm super excited. Before we get started next week with the first block, I thought it would be great to start the discussion on fabric selection. I would love to see your polls using the Quilt Along hashtags. I have sent out PDFs with the fabric requirements. On the PDF, I want to quickly explain that the fabric requirements are estimates that EQ8 generates. I am not great at estimates, especially with the irregular shapes included in foundation paper piecing. And then add on to that, some people use a lot more fabric per piece than I do. It's darn near impossible to be 100% accurate with estimates. Have at least as much fabric as it says. You may end up with excess, but you shouldn't be short. On the PDF, the rows across the table are the estimates that it generates for just that block, assuming that you're going to be using specific fabrics for each block. At the very, very bottom, the last row is the estimate, assuming you've only used the 5 different types of fabric, or the 5 colors of fabric through the quilt. And the total at the bottom is all you need if you're just using 5 colors through the whole quilt. For this quilt along, I would like to encourage you to dig through your stash for some of the fabric that maybe you've fallen out of love with. It's not necessarily bad quality fabric, it's just not really your style. Maybe you inherited it from somebody. That's actually some of the fabric that I'm using. Is not fabric that I purchased for myself. It is fabric that was given to me when a friend's grandmother passed away and she was a quilter. It's not my style, but it's pretty. It's just not something that I would probably pull out to use for myself. I just adore the idea of turning fabric that you don't love anymore into a quilt that's going to be cherished by a child in need, and they're going to love it to death. Working with scrap and stash fabric can sometimes be intimidating, especially without a lot of practice. And sometimes I still pull fabric with end results that I don't love. I think it's part of just being a crafter. Not every project turns out the way we'd hoped. It's okay to not love the final results as long as you learn something. It's kind of what I always tell myself. We can't get any better without making a few mistakes, and it's okay to take risks, as sometimes those quilts turn out the best. In an effort to avoid this from happening to anybody during this quilt along, I've assembled some tips that I think are important to keep in mind. If you're comfortable pulling fabric, you can just skip this video. With this quilt, there are endless opportunities for color selection, and I genuinely can't wait to see all the fabric pulls. So I really hope that everybody decides to share and post on Instagram or Facebook. So the most basic concepts of fabric selection that I think can be applied to all quilting projects. Number 1, pre-curated fabrics are not cheating. You can cherry pick from a line, know that the colors are going to match, that they're going to look good together, and you could even just buy a fat quarter bundle. Designers are famous for a reason. They're fabulous at pouring colors and prints in a way that most people find pleasing. I recently purchased Fabric Gypsies, our sponsor, was having a de-stash sale, and I recently purchased some fabrics that I just completely adore. So I'm not going to use them for this project because I decided to challenge myself and also make a quilt with some fabric that I don't love as much. But these are absolutely gorgeous, and they just look fabulous together. And this is not everything that's in the line. These are just the navies, but you could very easily throw in some of the line that comes in the reds and the greens, and then put it on a white background, and it's set. That's a whole quilt. You could buy just a straight up bundle and pick and pull what you need. Some of the bundles will probably even have enough background fabric, but not all of them will. And as busy as this quilt's going to be, I wouldn't go completely 100% with a bundle. But you could use the bundle for all of your colors and then have a cohesive background. All right, the next concept. Not all of your fabrics can be large print or very busy. Low volume and solids are the negative space that's built into a quilt. Negative space gives your brain a resting place when you look at art and at quilts, and tends to emphasize the overall shape and feel of a pattern. It's an important part of making a project feel balanced, and you must plan it into your quilt with solid or blender fabric. If you're not familiar with the term blender, squint at a quilt, and if the fabric blends and makes it look like it's just one color, that's a blender fabric. Negative space does not have to be white, although white does make the quilt feel clean and bright. If your blocks get too busy, you can build a negative space with sashing. The balance is very important. If you look at some of the quilts that are maybe busier than your taste, it's more than likely that they have a much lower negative space balance. And if you find a quilt that you think is maybe a little boring, it's probably got more negative space than your personal taste. So I think that there is a level of balance that it's kind of like Goldilocks. Every quilter has their preferred negative space versus positive space balance. And you just need to figure out where yours is.
I'm going to try to show you some examples of my next points using EQ8 on my computer. I don't have a ton of fabrics downloaded into the program, but there should be enough to successfully highlight my points. Here is an excellent example of using too many large print and busy fabrics. Look what happens when we take even just one of the busy prints and switch it out with a solid color. All of a sudden, the animals no longer seem overwhelming. If you're combining colors that are both warm and cool, such as with this quilt, you're going to want to pick colors that have similar tones. So it would be all neons or all pastels. In this case, they're all kind of muted, dark, earthy tones. When you're doing a monochromatic quilt, or a quilt that's coming from the same color spectrum, you want to make sure you mix in a variety of tones to give it a lot more depth. When in doubt, check out Pinterest or Google to find some color palettes that are maybe outside your normal comfort zone. If you're going bold or busy in this quilt, I would stick to solid colors since the pattern itself is already very busy. As you can see, I use Pinterest to inspire this quilt using the colorful bird palette. I often will pick a print that speaks to me and build the quilt from that single fabric, using all the different colors that have already been included by the designer. With 6 different faces and 12 different blocks, this is a very busy quilt. And because of this, I think you're going to want to make sure you use substantial negative space. Personally, I would make sure that at least 2/3 of the fabric is considered negative, meaning that it's a solid color of some sort, somewhere for your eyes to rest and for the pattern to kind of be able to stand out. It can still be scrappy, but you'll want the fabric to have similar tones and patterns to keep it feeling continuous. Thank you again for joining the quilt along. Remember to post your fabric pull with the hashtags so everyone can find it easily. There is 1 week left to sign up, so if you or your friend is still on the fence about joining us, now's the time.